So in this video I'm going to be discussing why I am vegan. And I'm just going to start with just a little basic ethics. The ethical system I use is a type of consequentialism where it's the effect of your actions on the well-being of others that is what matters. So if your actions are having a net decrease in the well-being of everyone involved, then you've done something bad. And if it's a net increase, you've done something good, all else being equal. Now, if all your options do result in a decrease in well-being, then you choose the one that has the least decrease in well-being, and that will be doing the right thing. So when we talk about farming in this video, I'm just going to be dealing with things that we get for food and personal products out of the farming. I'm not going to delve into the medical issues. That would be a separate topic. So with regard to animal products, the benefits that the humans are getting, these pleasure desires, aren't really going to make a big difference in the ethical scenario. This is for a variety of reasons. One being, we're talking about something that could easily be replaced by other things. So the enjoyment that one gets out of a meal made with animal products can be substituted with plant products pretty easily. Same with hair care type products or any other type thing that you make with animal products. Almost every single thing has an equally enjoyable analog plant-wise. Another issue is that when it's well-being that matters, it is fine to prevent someone from diminishing your well-being, an act of self-defense, which would, of course, diminish that person's well-being. But it's not fine to take someone's well-being for yourself and say, well, now his well-being is down and my well-being is up, but it's the same end result. That is unacceptable ethically. And putting aside emotional reasons why that should be unacceptable, logically it doesn't work. Because then you would be in a society where it's okay to take away from others to benefit yourself, which diminishes the overall well-being of everyone involved by knowing that you are in the kind of society where that type of thing is acceptable, which would extend to the animals just seeing that, the non-human animals just seeing that we are perfectly willing as long as something is different enough to subject it to that kind of treatment, and you're not really sure where that is going to stop. Or just the general idea you don't diminish others' well-being in order to increase your own. You only diminish others' well-being as a self-defense type mechanism. An argument that's commonly brought up is that, by people on my side is, well, you're killing them, so obviously it's wrong. Well, that would only be the case if they were immortal before this process started. But much like every other living thing, the animals will die. So the simple act of causing their death is not a non-starter for me. It is possible, with good husbandry, to give these animals a better life than they would have had in the wild, despite the fact that you will kill them. Again, they would have died in the wild too. So the question is the animal's life better for having been on the farm than it would have been having been in the wild? That's the only way that you can ethically farm these animals. So a commonly raised point in favor of eating these animals is that the death in the wild would have been much, much worse than the death on an assembly line. That getting torn up by a predator is worse than being quickly killed on an assembly line. And often this is the case, but not always. Especially when it gets to these automated processes. Because the automated processes sometimes miss the vital points on the animals, at which point you're going to have an animal, for example, a cow, being skinned alive by the machines, fully aware of what's going on, or a chicken being boiled alive to get its feathers off. So it's not automatically true that the death in a slaughterhouse is less painful than the death in the wild. For some animals, it's way, way worse. But let's just pretend, for the sake of argument, that it were the case that we had slaughterhouses that weren't causing this massive suffering, this terrible fear in the animals as they watch their brethren get slaughtered, would that be enough to say that it's okay to farm these animals? No. It's not just about the death of the animal. Life is more than just the end. If the animal's life leading up to that death was just horrible suffering, then you don't get to say, well, at least it died better. No. I would personally rather have a great life with a horrible death than a horrible life with a great death. Maybe I'm crazy, but that just seems to me like a way better deal. Getting, a large amount of time where I'm happy and a small amount of time where I'm sad. So, no, you can't just say, well, it's an easier, quicker death on the farm and get away with that. Now, another argument that I see quite often is the I don't push my meat on you, so why are you pushing your veganism on me argument. I find this to be one of the flimsiest arguments one could possibly make. Could you imagine how you'd react if I said, I don't push my racism on you, so why do you push your equality on me? Sounds pretty stupid when you hear something that you actually disagree with, doesn't it? It's because it's a terrible argument. And even putting aside that it is a terrible argument, it doesn't hold water. I get so many people trying to push me to eat meat, trying to tell me what a fool I am for not eating the meat, how wrong I am to consider the animal's feelings. It's not usually the other way around, at least not in my experience. In my experience, it's usually meat eaters trying to convince me to go back. The don't judge me argument. Well, one of my pet peeves is when people say they're non-judgmental, they don't make judgments about others. Bull fucking shit. You make judgments about everything in every situation. That's a basic fact of psychology. Now, I don't necessarily have to accept the judgment that I make as true when I'm trying to make a judgment about the compassion of a person, about the person's kindness. Whether or not they're willing to pay others to torture animals so that they can have a little bit of fun, yeah, that's going to come into play. And yes, if you're buying factory farmed meat, you are paying someone to torture animals. Why do you think they're torturing the animals? It's not just because they think it's fun. It's because you paid them to do it. So when I'm trying to judge the kindness, the empathy, the compassion of a person, their choice to pay others to torture animals definitely comes into play. The humans are special argument. Well, what is it that makes humans special? I often hear some silly thing like a soul, which we know doesn't exist. Or that we were ordained to be special by God, who we know doesn't exist. No, those are ridiculous. If you want to call humans special, you need to first of all identify what it is about us that's special, and then explain why that makes a moral difference. Another thing you have to do is identify what it is that a human is. How would you define human? I've heard various attempts at it over the years. One that is so easy to dismiss, it's shocking that it's even still used as a definition for species, but the ability to reproduce with other humans. That is idiotic. First of all, if I were to cut my balls off right now, then you'd suddenly be able to say, well, you're not human anymore. If you want to say, oh no, it's that your DNA could code for balls. So if I had a kid who didn't have the genes for balls, he would not be human. How many differences would it take in the DNA to make you not human? What's this ideal human that you're comparing everyone to and saying how far away from that you can get? What if I took a group of humans and selectively bred them until they turned into pigs after, from artificial selection over a few thousand years? Would the pigs that they had turned into that were now indistinguishable from the farm pigs be acceptable to eat? Where along the way did they stop being humans and start being pigs? It's all ridiculous. The humans are special argument fails harder than any other argument I've seen. And let's not forget the possibility of space invaders coming in and eating us. If you want to say the humans are special arguments, well, maybe they'll say the space invaders are special. Or what if they're nice space people, like the Vulcans, and they come in and they want to say hi and be peaceful with us, and they can talk to us, and they make friends with us? Would you say that there's nothing wrong with killing them just because they're not human? Whatever that means. Now let's get into a little bit of specifics with certain industries. The egg industry. One process that if it's happening, it's pretty much impossible for your eggs to be ethical is culling. That's the process of killing the males as soon as they're born, or with a new technology that's coming out, squishing the egg while the chicken's still inside of it, which is just as awful. It's still a formed chicken in there, it just hasn't hatched yet. If your eggs are coming from somewhere that culls the chickens, it's not ethical. Those males are not leading better lives than they would have in the wild. Much, much worse. Especially the way it's done on factory farms. On factory farms, there are two methods typically used. One is throw them all in a big giant bag till they suffocate. The other is throw them in a device called a macerator. This is a device with whirling blades where they go down a conveyor belt of death, and they fall in, and their bodies are chopped and torn apart while they're alive as babies. About 200 million of them a year, I believe, go through this process. Yes, that's 200 million male chicks are culled every year between the bags and the macerators, which means about 1 million a day, so that you can have eggs. Lovely. Now, I do have a friend who her family has a farm where they do not cull the male chickens. They just let them live. I will eat the eggs from her farm. So I guess technically I'm not a vegan. I just want the animals to not be harmed or to benefit from the interaction. There was a farm in England that tried that, not culling the male chickens. You know what happened to them? The government shut them down because they claimed that the owner of the farm would have to register the unculled male chicks as part of his products, even though they weren't something that could produce any money for him. In other words, the government decided, you know what, you want to be kind? Fuck you. Yeah, that really happened. With dairy. Now, this requires the cows to constantly become pregnant, so you need to find out what happens with the calves. If they're being raised on a farm that has good husbandry, then that's fine. And you need to find out the health of the females, because it's not really that great of a thing to be pregnant all the time. So if they're not getting any time off, that farm is abusing the cows. Now, the friend I mentioned before, she has a friend with a goat farm, and from what I can tell, those goats are treated very well. I'd have no problem drinking the milk from that farm. With meat, it's all going to come down to how the animals were treated. Were they raised in cages, or did they have access to the outdoors? When the weather was poor, were they allowed to come inside and rest? If we're talking about cows, are they able to graze? If we're talking about social animals, are they able to exhibit their natural behaviors and interact with each other? If they're animals that had to be castrated for health reasons, was it done with anesthetic or was it done without anesthetic? Do the chickens still have their beaks? If you're debeaking the chickens, that is a horrible, insidious practice that should not be happening. You wouldn't need to if you weren't abusing them. I should elaborate. Chickens have their beaks cut off when they're babies, because when you keep them in battery cages, they lose their minds and start pecking at each other. So this is done to prevent them from doing that, but it would be completely unnecessary if the chickens were allowed to socialize as normal chickens would. It's only because of the torture we're already inflicting on them that we have to inflict even more torture. I can find organic meat in various popular supermarkets, or meat that's labeled as free range, but if you actually delve into it, it's just factory farmed meat. And this is really screwing over the farmers. I mean, you should be pissed about this. The farmers that are taking the time to do good husbandry practices, to treat their animals well, are being screwed by big companies, because these farmers that are putting in all this effort, putting in all this extra cost to do this, are being undercut by the large companies who will pretend that they do this, who will put on their labels something like cage-free chicken on very popular brand in Walmart that I won't name so I don't get sued, but they definitely are lying. So if you want to support eating meat and you don't want to support torture, your best bet is going to be to go to animal welfare approved farms, or just go to a farmer's market, ask if you can see how the animals are treated on their farm, and then know for sure that at least the food you're buying comes from an animal that had a hell of a lot better life than the animals that are used by the big supermarket. So after all of this, why am I a vegan? Well, while I would support farms with good husbandry, while I would not have a problem with eating their products, I don't think it's possible for us to set up a system where we are being fed regularly from animals that are treated well. I think it would cost way too much to implement, and I don't think we have the land necessary for it. It takes much more land to raise animals well than it does to just stuff them in battery cages. I think that the global starvation problem would extend to an American starvation problem if we were to try to expand good husbandry such that everybody could eat meat that was treated well. And this kind of an expansion, you think global warming's a problem now. Imagine just vast areas of land having the trees cut down so that you can grow more cows. Be devastating to the planet, devastating to the hunger problem, devastating to the economy. All of that together is why I don't think that that kind of a system is realistic. So given what is realistic, a system where the animals are going to be tortured, going to be in pain for their entire lives, I think that the best path for the world is vegan. In a hypothetical world, in one that doesn't really exist, yes, you could have it be the case that it is better ethically to eat animals. We don't live in that world. We don't live in a world of limitless resources, of limitless land, without global warming, without global starvation, with limitless funds to pay for the absurdly expensive meat that's produced when done well. So for me, I'll be a vegan most of the time if a friend who has a farm and raises the animals well, and I can see that that's true, offers me some products, I will accept those. But I'm not going out of my way to find them. And that's all for now. Peace.